You see me now, yeah?
I can. Brilliant. Welcome to
Jolly good. Hello.
Hey Dave, welcome. So you're going to talk to a little bit about ufology and some strange stuff that you've experienced or you've heard stories of. Could we start off by, can you talk to me about the most, I don't know how to describe, sinister or strange thing or unnerving thing you've ever been told?
Yeah, this was actually a case I was actually going to go over with you because Halloween, right, it's just around the corner. So it seems fitting to tell you about probably one of the creepiest cases that's ever come my way in 17 years of active investigation. So obviously I've been investigating since late 2007 as an active UFO investigator. And during that time, have literally delved into hundreds and hundreds of cases from around the world. And sometimes those cases have got really creepy, unnerving elements to them. And I mean, a lot of the subject is kind of quite spooky, and it puts some people away from it entirely. So my own mother, for example, she doesn't want to go anywhere near the subject because she hears me and my brother and father talking about it like it's an everyday thing, as real as the table you can touch or whatever. And she really doesn't like that. It kind of spooks her out, and she'd rather just not know, if this stuff is going on. But I've dealt with in talking with many, many people who've had these experiences over the years. You see the similarities between cases, so
Mm.
stuff that initially can sound really wild and really way out there, like some sort of sci-fi movie. You start to see that it's actually going on because you talk with so many people with different backgrounds, and they're all reporting the same type of things, the same types of beings, the same types of objects seen in the air, craft, if you want to call them that. There's lots of different viewpoints on what's going on with this subject. But the case I was going to cover initially with you is a case from Scotland, from Glasgow. And it's a repeat contact case. So the gentleman involved has not only had UFO sightings, but also direct interaction with beings, commonly referred to as contact. A lot of people know it as alien abduction. Contact doesn't always involve abduction experiences. So an abduction is generally where somebody will apparently kind of go aboard a craft and they'll find themselves upon it and surrounded by beings, and they might have examination procedures and different things done on them. But a lot of the time contact can also involve just seeing a being sort of like in their room or vicinity and not actually remembering going elsewhere, but just having them there in their locality. This case is absolutely fascinating, and it's got lots of experiences throughout the gentleman's life. Now, the gentleman's name is Rob. I'm allowed to reveal his first name. A lot of the time, I won't reveal witnesses' names if they want to keep their names hidden, and that's because of the stigma of the subject. So, and straight away with that, when people want to kind of hide their names, it adds a kind of level of authenticity to it. Because if they don't want their names revealed, it's quite obvious that they're not doing it for any kind of fame or fortune,
Mm.
because they actively don't want their details and that sort of thing. Rob was quite open about his experiences. I'm absolutely convinced of the authenticity of this particular case. I spoke with Rob in great detail about a number of incidents that had gone on right back to his childhood. And some of his earlier experiences, up to about the age of 30 or so, he'd actually been writing a diary. So he actually passed on to me a diary that he'd written decades before because he'd started documenting these experiences, this weird stuff that's going on in his life.
Mm.
And he knew that it was out of the ordinary. And he'd actually been writing it down, which was brilliant, yeah, because straight away there was that kind of authentic angle to it. It wasn't like me going asking for him, oh, can you do
Mm.
some drawings and this sort of thing, or can you, give me an overview and I'll write it down. He just passed me this diary, and he was like, yeah, there's a load of it in there. So his earlier experiences, he kind of stopped doing that about the age of 30. I don't know why, he probably couldn't be bothered, but so the later experiences I went through with great depth to get the details of. But these experiences I'm about to cover with you were from his diary, and he passed on to me original drawings that he'd done ages before the investigation of these events. And it was immediately obvious to me from the details in that diary and also the questioning to him that this had happened, and it's absolutely fascinating. And I'm going to delve into a number of these experiences. There's stuff that happened before this point, right back to sort of age of about 6 or whatever. But the experience happened on the 25th of November, 1971. That's the first experience I'm going to go over with you. and it's a an apparent dual abduction of him and his older brother. And this was one of the ones he'd written down, and it occurred in the outskirts of Glasgow, Househillmuir Road, where he was living at the time with his parents and his brother. So on this particular night, his parents had gone out to see a musical. Had gone out for the evening, and they'd left his cousin to babysit them both, basically him and his brother. Now at the time, there was this show on The Untouchables, a gangster themed drama show, and it was set to be on, and he was really looking forward to seeing this show, right? But unfortunately, there was a delay in the programs, and instead of being on at 7, it was on at half 7. And his parents had previously agreed with the cousin that that was his bedtime, right? And he had to go up at half 7. So they start having this row about him going up to bed and all this sort of thing. And they're in the living room, and he's fighting it out, seeing if he can stay up an extra half an hour because he's been really looking forward to watching the show. Yeah. And all of a sudden, the living room is flooded by bright white light. It's coming in from outside. Yeah, you can see it's coming in from outside the house, and it's just really, really bright. The cousin immediately gets really concerned by this, and she's like, "Don't go and look. Don't look out the window." But Rob's absolutely fascinated by what's causing the white light, so he runs across to the window and just ignores her and runs over to the window and has a look outside. The curtains were drawn at the time, but the white light was kind of flooding from around the outside of the curtains, very, very bright. He looks outside, and what he sees is a glowing area of white lights coming from above down onto the road, and it's moving along the road, and he says it hit the sides of some of the houses, and it was kind of moving along the road like that, and he couldn't see where this light was coming from. It was just there, and it moved off to the right out of sight, and he couldn't see it any further. So he's still fascinated by what it is. So he rushes past his brother, who's standing by the living room door, pushes past him, runs outside the front of the house, runs down the front garden, and stands there by the garden gate, looking for where this light has gone off to the right. And he looks to the right, and further down Househillmuir Road, there's kind of like a little side road, and just beyond that, behind one of the houses, he saw a disc, a glowing disc of bright white light hovering behind the roof of this house. He said it was almost like a block of cheese with a slice cut out because of the angle of the house so he had this triangular bit cut out, and he'd drawn this picture of it. It's really interesting. So it was there, and the amount of light pouring from this thing was just bleeding out all the color of the surroundings. A minute later, his brother comes down, and he's also staring at it. So the two of them, and they're standing at the end of the garden looking in the direction of this disc. And they're like, wow, this is amazing. And, all the colors were drained out, and they're amazed at what's going on. He peers at his brother a second, asking what is happening with this. When he looks back, he suddenly realizes there's a figure standing to his right. Yeah. The figure had its left hand on his right shoulder. So it was just there alongside him. It was taller than him. Couldn't see the face of the figure because it was facing the same direction as them, looking towards the disc. But it was about sort of 5 foot high. Had a bald head, completely bald head. Couldn't really see the color of the skin because of the light bleeding the color out, but he thinks it was kind of like a pale grey color. That was actually proven later on, but we'll get to that. So you can see the back of this figure, and it was wearing a black shawl gown type thing that was down from the neck downwards, right the way down its body. And it wasn't speaking with him at all or anything like that. It was just there, standing alongside him with his hand on his shoulder. So they're looking towards this disc with this figure next to him, and then the next minute, bang! All of a sudden, him and his brother, they're still standing there, but they're now surrounded in what appears to be this glowing pink energy. He described it as kind of like a sphere of neon sort of pink energy all around him. That's all he can see, all directions, yeah. But as he looks, the energy kind of starts to dissipate and break apart, and there's gaps forming in it. And through the gaps, he can see daylight. And as it breaks apart, it kind of disappears over a number of seconds. And he realizes a couple of things. He now realizes, one, it's daylight, and a minute ago it had been sort of late evening. So all of a sudden it's daylight. And secondly, he's no longer standing at the end of their garden path. Him and his brother were in exactly the same position as what they'd been in, but they were now in a new position. And he looks around and he realizes they are a few doors down. There was this kind of side path. We found the exact position, yeah, down this side path that leads through to another road. And they're halfway down that near this kind of electric box. And he looks down. There's a kid on the floor playing with a toy fire truck or something, and he's just staring up at them like this. And I mean, it's entirely possible that kid literally saw them like appear out of thin air or something. I don't know. They never spoke with him. But there was also a woman leaned out of a house, the house that the disc had been behind. They were kind of quite close to where that had been. And she leans out the window and she shouts out and she says, "Are you the two kids that have been missing all night?" That's what she says to them, right? Now, what we can imply from that is that they'd been gone the whole night. It's now the following morning. Parents probably came back from their night out, found they weren't there, maybe got in touch with the cops. We don't really know. But he's down there, and they don't answer the woman. He just wants to be back at his own house. He knows where he is. He's deeply concerned by what's going on. So ignoring his brother, he runs down the side path back to Househillmuir Road, turns left, and starts running down towards his house. As he's running towards the end of his house, where they had been previously, yeah, he realizes that the memories are literally leaving his mind. Now, I've dealt with other cases where exactly the same thing's been reported. So they talk about missing time with cases where people have lost memories of aspects of, or sometimes entire experiences. And that was what was going on. He was literally feeling that happen. He was literally feeling the memories of this incident go. And by the time he was back to his house, he had no memory of anything. He had no memory of it anymore occurring, right? And it was gone. And so he never queried it with his parents or anything. He doesn't really remember what happened next regarding that, regarding whether his parents queried it, that sort of thing. So you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, Dave, how on earth do you know that then? If it vanished from his head, how are you telling me all this stuff, yeah? Well, the memories did come back to him, but they came back to him a number of years later on. And it was actually another UFO sighting he had with a glowing white disc-shaped object. And that triggered his memory of this previous incident. And in the days following that other sighting, which happened in 1986, yeah, he had memories back, and the memories of what happened slowly came back. He still didn't have memories of what happened between being at the end of his garden and being in the side thing. That bit's completely gone, and he still has no recollection of that. But everything else that I've just taken you through there, he had recollection of. So that was that. That was that incident, and he thinks that maybe his dad suspected maybe that was what had happened to them, that it was somehow involved with alien abduction or whatever. He said that him and his dad used to go fishing. Unfortunately, his father's passed away now, so I can't ask him about this. But he said him and his father used to go out fishing quite a lot, and his dad would regularly bring up the subject of UFOs and abduction and things with him. And he thinks, looking back at it, that maybe his dad kind of suspected that that's what had happened to him and his brother, and was trying to kind of trigger his memory of it or get extra information about that. But he can't prove that.
So was that in 1971? Was that the first
Yeah,
experience?
and he's got the exact date for that because he wrote it down in his diary when it happened. So it's
Does
quite
his-
rare to get an actual date for things.
So this was a shared experience with his brother.
That's correct.
Does his brother corroborate elements or all of the story?
His brother does not want to talk about it, and that this reason for the trauma that caused, but not just that, but this later incident I'm also going to go over with you.
Okay.
A lot of people with this subject, when they have these things happen to them, they kind of push it away. Yeah, they don't want to, because it's so far out the norm to them, and they just want to get on with their life. And his brother doesn't want to kind of entertain, and he doesn't want to talk to me about it, unfortunately. So you do get that. You sometimes get cases where you've got other people present that you want to talk with, but you can't directly. But as I said, I fully trust Rob, especially due to the fact that he'd written these things down in a diary. So it wasn't the first experience. He had other previous things with paranormal type activity going on as well. Like they had things going on at their home, like glowing orbs of light were seen. That's quite common, and a lot of people talk about that in terms of ghosts and link it with paranormal. But I've dealt with lots and lots of contact cases where people have had alien encounters, what you would commonly call contact, but they've also had these paranormal incidents go on in their house. It happens a hell of a lot. Like it happens in over the last time I did a count with my cases, back when I did this count, it was about 100 or so cases I looked into, and in over 85% of those cases, people were reporting having poltergeist type encounters in their house as well, which you have to admit is a significant percentage, yeah, far more than it should have been just by coincidence alone. So I'm picking and choosing particular instances that fit with this, yeah. So we had this later encounter. There wasn't too much to that. There was an apparent potential military intercept went on with that 1986 sighting. And with this one, he was around his friend's house in a place called Drewry, and again, outskirts of Glasgow, Vanguard Street. And he'd gone round to his friend's house, and they were just kind of playing with this pet dog in the front garden of the house. This was broad daylight, middle of the day, nice sunny day. His friend's mother and sister were also sitting on the front step. They were also witness to this. So lots of witnesses to what happened with this. But basically, he was playing frisbee out in the front lawn, and his friend threw the frisbee. He suddenly ducks, seeing this white object, thinking it's the frisbee flying towards him, and it wasn't. And when he looks back up, there's this object hovering in the vicinity in the sky. And he said it was about 7 to 9 foot long, a kind of domed disc, like flattened domed disc shaped thing. And it had this very bright white color, potentially like reflecting the sunlight off it. But the top also had these strange burn marks on it, which was really weird, kind of like this strange kind of like lines on the top of it, almost looked like it had got burnt. And it was just there hovering, and it kind of started to move off to the southwest on a straight path. It was completely silent. Certainly seemed too big to be some kind of model. And that kind of disappeared out of view, and they ran upstairs to the front bedroom to continue looking at it. Thing apparently moved off towards the River Clyde, performed a right angle turn, and then started heading northwest along the River Clyde until it had vanished out of sight. Yeah, didn't do anything wild like shoot away thousands of miles an hour. I've dealt with lots of cases where that has been reported, by the way. So it moves out of sight. A minute later, they go downstairs and are having a chat with his mum and sister about it, and his friend was kind of dismissing it. It was kind of, that was a weird thing, like maybe a remote control model, and he was like, you joking? It was like way too big for that. It was like obviously some kind of craft thing. Anyway, while they're there talking about this, all of a sudden there's this loud roaring sound, and what he says was a military jet, he thinks a Harrier jump jet, came across the roof of the house at low altitude, boom, and headed off to the southwest in the direction that this UFO vanished in. Now, he doesn't know whether that's anything related. He did say that they'd never seen any other jets in the vicinity, so it wasn't. And obviously, over an urbanized area, they wouldn't fly military jets at low altitude. So that certainly appears to be some kind of interception potentially of this object. But we don't know. The nearest military base is like 100 miles away, but that's actually quite a short distance when you're flying a jet, yeah? So it could have taken off from that base. But we don't really know. It's too far in the past to look into. Now, cases involving military potential military intercepts, I'll always go digging when I can. Yeah. So he didn't have the exact date for this. When we've got an exact date, I can sometimes query the Ministry of Defence and that sort of thing. I've raised freedom of information requests. The trouble is, let's say the MOD come back and they say, "Oh, we've got nothing on record for that." How do you know? How do you know that they have or haven't? You know, they can easily just dismiss it and I'll go away, right? But sometimes they've been quite helpful. Same with Birmingham International Airport. So I live quite close to Birmingham International Airport, and I'll sometimes contact them for things that are seen in the vicinity around sort of South Birmingham area to see if they've got anything on record. And usually they'll just come back and they'll say, "Oh, we didn't get anything on radar," and you're like, "Okay." And you're like, did they or didn't they? Who knows, right? So anyway, I'm going to move forward to this other incident that happened with. So he was now in his sort of mid-20s. It's early 90s, and we're going to move to a new location, which is Gare Loch on the outskirts of the village of Rue, which is still kind of in the vicinity of Glasgow, but you know, other kind of side villages. And he used to go fishing on Gare Loch with his friends, and they'd just go out there in the boat. There was a sort of boating centre, and quite close to the boating centre where they kind of head off from and come back to, there was a stately home called Blairvadach, I'm sure the last time I checked it had actually been demolished or something, but I've got some images off Google Images when it was still there, yeah. And at the time, it was a stately home, right? And you could, walk around it and that sort of thing. Now, I think it got turned into offices after a while, and they were using it for offices instead. But the grounds of Blairvadach, big areas of kind of open grass, and they had a few people would have caravans on. They were allowed to have their caravans on this open area grass, and one of the people who had a caravan there was Rob's father. So that was very convenient because they could go out fishing on the loch and then go and stop in the caravan overnight or whatever, and then go back to Rue in the morning and head for home. So he told me they used to do this quite regularly. So on this particular, we don't have the exact date of this one this time. You just written it down. This was the year, but we didn't have an exact date. We do know it's early 90s, and they'd gone out fishing on the loch for the day, and it started to drizzle lightly. So they decided to give it a rest and kind of head back to the caravan for the evening. So they returned there. There was his brother Mick, and his friend Raymond. Again, those are their real first names. So obviously his brother Mick had been involved in the previous incident and back in 1971. I believe there was a couple of other incidents that he was also part of. But his friend Raymond hadn't ever seen anything himself or anything, but they'd told him about some of the weird stuff that had gone on in their life. So they're out there at this caravan, and they decided to just settle down. They had a drink. He was fine about that. He didn't have a lot of drinks. So I don't think alcohol had anything to do with what happened here. But I'll always ask. Yeah, you've always got to ask people and that sort of thing. So he had a drink, but they're just sitting there having a chat, and it gets to about 11:30 at night, and the most of the curtains of the caravan were open at this point, and of course it's just blackness outside Blackfield. But they could see the streetlights of the A814, which is the road that runs up the northern side of the loch. Yeah, so they had a view from it. It was about 20 or so feet away, so they're quite close to where the road edge is. And on the far side of the road is this boating centre. So they're looking through the trees, and all of a sudden they see further down the road, out of the main end window of the caravan, they see a figure coming along, and it's moving along the path towards them. It's too far away to see what it is or who it is or whatever. It's just a torso and somebody there kind of coming along the path. Yeah. Here's the problem. Yeah. The height of the field where they were was kind of a good 12 feet above where the path was. Yeah. So they shouldn't have been able to see anything. They shouldn't have been able to see the top half of a person walking along the path. Yeah. Now, Rob sees this at a distance, and immediately what comes to his head is it's a car. It's a car with a sunroof open, and somebody's mucking around and they're sticking themselves at the top of the sunroof. Yeah. Because that was the only thing that could account for the height and the fact that they could see it. So that's why, he's trying to logically think about what it could be. Yeah. And it's moving along, and it's coming along very smoothly. So it's not kind of like there's no kind of walk to it or gate. It was kind of just kind of gliding, sort of moving along the path in their direction, but it looks like the top half of a figure. Yeah? And they keep their eye on it. And as it gets nearer, they suddenly realize what it is. And what it was the same being that him and his brother had seen back in 1971, wearing the same clothes, wearing the same black gown, but they could see the face now. He didn't describe it as an alien, right? He said its face was skeletal, like pale, with dark eye sockets. Yeah, like a skull. That's what he described it like. And what he was describing, and from the pictures that he also drew, he was describing a grey. There's one there. I don't know if you can see that on my behind me, that model. So greys are the most commonly described beings in contact experiences, and to many people, they're sort of like the quintessential look of an alien because they've been picked up in the media quite a lot and that sort of thing. And of course, Steven Spielberg used them in his classic film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, X-Files, all that. Yeah. There are other types of beings that are seen almost as much as greys, but they're nothing like as well publicized. So a lot of people think, oh, that's an alien, right? And a lot of people would recognize that. So this was a grey, but he wasn't describing it as that. He just said it had kind of pale with dark eye sockets because he's seeing it at a distance, and that's what he interpreted at, like kind of like a skull. And this being is moving and it's gliding along the path. It almost looks like it was potentially hovering or something, or on some sort of device that they couldn't see out of sight behind the. Either way, it was up way too high in the air than it should have been. Yeah, and it's moving along the path, and they pointed out now. Raymond sees it as well. Yeah, he'd never been involved in that experience. It's quite rare for other people to get involved in this way, to see something that somebody's seen on a previous occasion. They're quite a rare thing, especially as they hadn't been directly involved. And he tells them that's what me and my brother saw back in 1971. Yeah. So this figure's coming along the path, and they're just keeping their eye on it. Yeah? And eventually it gets too close, and they can't see it out of the main window anymore, but they can see it out the side window, and they keep looking at it out the little side window of the caravan. Yeah. By this point, it's at its closest point to them, a good, like about 20 feet away from them. Yeah. And it's coming along like that. And as it moves kind of in line with them, it turns its head and basically just looks straight at them. But it keeps moving, and it kind of carries on moving out of sight. Yeah. And so it vanishes out of sight, and they're like really spooked out, and they're like, what's going to happen next? And they're thinking it's going to come and get them or whatever. And it's really scary. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, this noise starts. It's kind of like screaming type sounds begin, and thuds, and they can feel something hitting the caravan, making these kind of vibrational thuds on the caravan. And they're looking around like this, and eventually they find out that it's coming from the other side of the caravan, away from where the road is, on the other side window. But he said the curtains were drawn at the time, so they couldn't see out. And his friend Raymond kind of approaches this window and pulls back, bravely pulls back the curtains. And what he sees is a sheep. He sees a sheep with its face pushed up against the outside of the glass. The screaming noises that they were hearing were the sheep in distress. And the thuds were the sound of its legs bashing off the outside of the caravan. So this sheep is apparently up in thin air, in a state of great panic. Now, obviously, seeing that, terrifying, right? He backs off from the curtain, and the curtain falls closed, and everything stops. There's no more sound. There's no more screams. There's no more thuds. It's just silence. And then when they look again behind the curtain, they're like, what on earth's going on? Mick was frightened. Raymond was, yeah, they weren't happy about the situation at all. Apparently, Mick went round and started searching for some, that blue rope, the blue safety rope that you get in caravans, that sort of thing. So he went and found a reel of that, and then proceeded to go right around the inside of the caravan, tying it around all the locks and around the door handle and that sort of thing, like in a state of panic, like scared it was going to get in. And Rob said it was like, there were cable all over the place, like spider web. And then he went and sat down cross-legged underneath the table at the other end of the caravan and refused to talk. Raymond also very, very frightened about what was going on. They remained there until the hours of the morning, until the sun came up. Obviously didn't sleep, really frightened about what had happened, worried that something else was going to take place. Seemingly nothing else did take place. When the morning light come up, it's about 6:30 in the morning, they finally decide to, bravely peep outside the caravan. I mean, you can put yourself in this situation. They're out there in the middle of nowhere, and this creepy stuff's going on, and there's nobody else there to kind of help them or anything. They're just out in the middle of nowhere. And they look outside the caravan. There's no sign of any sheep, dead or alive. It's just, there's nothing. And they make their way away from the caravan, walk back into Rue and head for home. And that was where that particular experience ended. But yeah, nightmare fuel.
I I'm so Dave. I didn't see the part of the sheep coming. I didn't anticipate that. So was the sheep levitating then, kind of pushed against the?
That's what you can interpret, because the window is definitely not a ground level. Yeah, so it was up in the air. Yeah, so there's different ideas for this, right? So the animal mutilation phenomena is an aspect of the subject that, and for those who are listening who don't know what that is, essentially they keep finding these animals, and this is still going on today, by the way. This isn't like just a historic thing. They keep finding animals, a lot of the time farm animals, but sometimes there have been cases involving domestic pets. They'll find the animal often like completely drained of blood. Sometimes there'll be kind of small holes on it and it's had kind of various internal organs extracted out of it. Sometimes the jaw flesh is removed, or other parts of the animal are sort of taken away. There's never any footprints. There's never any kind of signs that it's been done by anybody that have come there and done this and left the carcass. They just find these animals, and in some cases they know that the animal's been alive like the previous night, and then they find it in the morning dead, like with his injuries on. Now, there's lots of theories about what that is. Some people, and this has been going on for decades, right? And in the past, people have thought as some sort of like devil worshipping cult or something like that. and they're taking these parts of these animals and they're hiding it. But you have to ask yourself, yeah, if they're doing that, yeah, why wouldn't they just take the car? You know, why would they leave it there for people to find the dead animal? It makes no sense, yeah, unless they're doing it intentionally, right? Here's the thing. That was back in like the 80s or whatever. Yeah, it's still going on. I watched a documentary literally a couple of months back involving cases in America that occurred last year. This is still a current thing, but it's not talked about in the news. There is a cover up going on with it. It's not one of my particular fortes as a ufologist, but I know other people who are absolute experts in the mutilation phenomena, and they've gone digging into trying to get evidence for it, and they've hit brick walls where there shouldn't have been brick walls. Like they've tried to get autopsy reports for certain animals, and usually there wouldn't be any problem with that. And they said that, you know, that somebody's refusing to give them, you know, almost like there's some kind of cover up going on with this about what's happened with that animal. Some people think it's some sort of military exercise. There have been military helicopters sometimes seen after these incidents. There have also been UFOs seen at some cases, like people are seeing sort of glowing orbs of light and that sort of thing. And then the next day they find the animal there. There's very few cases where people claim to have seen a mutilation take place. Anyway, back to the case. Sorry, I'm sidetracked there talking about another aspect of the subject, right? But it links in with this, right? Because there's a sheep, yeah. So some people are like, oh, it's a mutilation. But if it's a mutilation, wouldn't they have found the dead sheep outside the caravan in the morning? The dead sheep not there, yeah. My personal viewpoint, right? So then Rob thinks, you know, was it trying to scare them intentionally, you know, sort of? But you don't really get that with this subject. The beings don't really. There is fear involved with these cases, yeah. But a lot of the time, it's just fear of the unknown, because the beings are kind of quite cryptic and that sort of thing. But there's not many cases where they intentionally seem to be frightening people. People are generally scared of them because you would, right? You know, you're seeing these things that's not human, and sometimes it's doing sort of examination procedures on you and things. I mean, that can be very, very frightening, especially if you don't know what's going on, where you are, that sort of thing. But I can't buy that the being was doing that to frighten them intentionally for some weird reason. I mean, why would it? Yeah. My personal viewpoint is that it's potential that there was a craft over the caravan that they couldn't see, and it was some sort of energy field or whatever that the sheep was unintentionally caught up in and was levitating off the air, some sort of anti-gravitational thing. But I don't have any proof for that. It's just my interpretation of probably what went on with that. I find it very unlikely it was done as some sort of weird scare tactic, because why? Yeah. And then also, I mean, there was no sign of the being coming in. You got the three of them. There was no sign of any missing time. He does not, because they stayed awake the whole night. Yeah. And he remembers staying awake for the rest of the night. So it doesn't look like anything else took place. Like they've got an hour where they can't remember and the being come in and they're abducted or anything like that. There's no sign of that with this. But it's just bizarre. So what you would call that is a visitation experience. Yeah, this is where people see the beings, but there doesn't seem to be an abduction. And I've dealt with cases where people have had visitations and the beings have conducted examination type procedures on them in their own house or in their own vehicle, that sort of thing.
So Rob, Mick, and who's the other guy? There were three people in
Raymond.
the caravan. Raymond,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
So they must have been, what, in late 30s? How old would they have been at this point?
Mid-20s.
Oh, mid-20s, sorry. So, you know, and they were there. There was no other caravans around, no other...
No, there was a few other caravans, but nobody's staying in at the time. So it's kind of, it's quite a remote area. Yeah, it's not like a caravan park. It was like there were a few caravans just there. So they were the only people there. There was nobody that would help them. I mean, there could have been somebody inside Blairvadach, maybe. I don't know. He didn't mention that, you know, they didn't kind of go to the stately home, knock on the door.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just kind of spooked out. They're in the caravan. They don't know what to do. There's a situation. It's so creepy. And there's just so many elements to it, like the being kind of moving along, you know, was it levitating? I've dealt with other cases where they levitate, but there's no definite rule for this, you see. I've dealt with lots of cases where the beings haven't levitated, where people see greys in their room and they're walking around. There's even some cases where they've apparently seemingly found kind of footprints or whatever, or, you know, disruptions that could have been caused by the being in their room, yeah. So they're not walking, but then I've dealt with other cases where the being does float. Yeah, and there's so many elements to this. It's really fascinating, and there's no rules. There's no definite, like 100% of the time this happens, but there's lots of things that happen many times. Like the missing time thing. Yeah, missing time is extremely common with contact experiences. there's very few contact experiences where the individual remembers entirely from start to finish without any gaps.
Mm.
Sometimes it's kind of like certain parts are missed out. Travel to the craft is often lost from memory, so they'll be in their room and then they might remember floating up off the bed or something like that, or even sometimes drifting across the room through the window and this sort of thing. But then there'll be a gap, and then they'll find themselves in this other location on the crafts, probably. Sometimes there's proof of that, like there's a window there and they can look out and they can see like either clouds or sometimes
Mm.
outer space, and they've kind of left the planet and they see stars outside. Um, but there's no definite rules to that. So that's called travel amnesia. So it happens so regularly that it's been given the term travel amnesia. And so they'll be there and then they'll be at this other location and then they'll be back in their bed. So there's kind of the skeptical viewpoints on contact on an alien abduction, and one of the main ones that's often leveled at it is called sleep paralysis, where people's bodies shut down because otherwise we'd all act out our dreams. Yeah, so when we drop off to sleep, our body's muscles shut down, so we can't move because otherwise you'd act out. I actually saw a program once where it was interviewing people where that didn't happen, and they were on the bed like trying to shoot people with invisible guns and all sorts. It's just crazy. So yeah, obviously most of the time that doesn't happen to people. Sometimes you can kind of come out of that sleep state and be half awake and still have the muscles shut down. Now, in that scenario, you will often see and hear very strange things. It's quite often common to see kind of shadowy forms in the room. Sometimes they climb up on the person and push down on them, which, because if they're paralyzed, yeah, they're going to think something's holding me down, yeah. So then the brain kind of visualizes what's holding them down.
Shadow people, is that a phenomenon you've heard about? Because I know you were talking about
Yeah,
sleep paralysis.
yeah, dealt with lots of cases involving shadow people, shadow beings, whatever you want to call them. It often with contact cases, you get people who've experienced this phenomena as well. It's unknown whether it's directly linked with their alien experiences or not. I mean, there's plenty of cases on record where people have seen shadow beings without seeing alien beings or having contact at all. So it might be something completely separate. My personal view, and we don't really know, and this is what keeps me fascinated with the subject, is these links between different aspects of the phenomena that you would consider to be completely separate, and yet people are reporting them again and again. So there's certainly some kind of link going on there. I've had lots of deep thoughts about why this might be. Now, with contact, the beings talk with people telepathically almost always. Yeah, in most cases, they are seen to kind of not move their mouth, but they can speak directly inside people's minds. People will hear them in their own language. So if a Spanish person gets abducted, they'll hear them talking in Spanish to them. Sometimes they'll talk through emotions instead of actual words, so they'll kind of sense different emotions from them. But most of the time, it's actual audible conversations they can have, and it works two ways, so people can kind of think questions and the being will answer and that sort of thing. As I said before, a lot of the time they're quite cryptic, but in having these telepathic communications, it's possible that it opens up their brain and gives them higher levels of perception, enhancing sixth sense type abilities. And then because of that, because of their contact, they're then more likely to experience other types of phenomena. And obviously, to go in with that viewpoint, you'd have to both believe in both alien contact and in ghostly phenomena, right? But let's say you do, that could explain it, yeah? That their brains are somehow enhanced by their contact, and then they're having these paranormal experiences in their home. Or maybe it's drawing them in, yeah? No, it's another thing, maybe it's nothing to do with like this telepathic communication, but because they're having contact, that in some way draws in ghostly type phenomena to them and they start to experience it around them. Electrical disturbances are quite common. So, like lights blowing, things turning on and off, obviously some of that you can put down skeptically to, just malfunctioning equipment, yeah? Like, for example, like my bedroom light yesterday just started switching itself on every like 15 or so minutes. We chucked it away now. I didn't think we had ghosts or aliens or anything in the house. I was like, broken, yeah. But, as an example there, yeah. So malfunctioning equipment happens all the time, right? But you get cases where it's seemingly that the person's emitting some kind of field. Like I've dealt with numerous cases where the person's been out walking around, and as they've walked past lampposts, the lampposts have kind of switched off and then gone back on and that sort of thing, almost like they're interfering with it. Now it comes and goes, it's not something permanent, because otherwise I could say to them, okay, take a video camera and walk down this line of 10 lamps and I want to see each one going off in turn, yeah. And so far nobody's been able to provide that for me on camera. Well, I try to get video evidence and photographic evidence for these things when I can. And there's all sorts of reasons for why that's missing. That's a whole conversation in itself, yeah. So, a lot of people are like, okay, if this is going on, everybody's got smartphones and everything. Why haven't we got hundreds and hundreds of videos of alien beings or ghostly phenomena, that sort of thing? And there's very, very valid reasons for that. But that, as I said, we could talk about half an hour on that in depth. If you want to, we can, yeah. But like anyway, back to shadow beings, yeah. So shadow beings seem to you have a lot of cases involving them. But then sometimes you've got cases where it looks kind of like a shadow being, but it's probably an alien entity. So a visitation experience, like I mentioned earlier on. So somebody will wake up in the night and they might see a kind of shadowy form standing alongside their bed. Yeah. Now, the reason why it's shadowy is not because it actually looks like that, but because the lights of their bedroom are off. So all they can see is a black, tall silhouette of some figure standing there. Yeah. So you could say that's sleep paralysis. Yeah. I mean, let's say they sit up, so they're not paralyzed. Yeah. So fine, you wipe that out. But let's say that situation. How do you interpret that? How do you interpret that as an alien being standing beside them that they can't see? It's in silhouette. Yeah. Or do you interpret that as a ghostly phenomena? Yeah.
Mm.
So sometimes it's open to interpretations. You've got this incident that's happened. Now, a lot of the time, with visitations, they'll also black out, which then leaves on a missing time, potentially an abduction. So they'll see the being. Now, in that scenario, let's put yourself in that situation. You wake up in the middle of the night and there's a shadowy figure standing next to your bed. Yeah, I find it highly unlikely that you're just going to be like, oh, okay, whatever, and go back to sleep. Yeah, yeah. You'd be very frightened. Yeah, if your spouse is there, you might wake them up. You might try to eject yourself in the bedroom as fast as possible. Yeah. And people don't, yeah. With these experiences, a lot of the time they'll see it and then they'll just kind of almost accept it, or they'll black out, like, and they'll actually feel that. They'll feel like they're being sedated, and then they'll be asleep. And the next thing they know, it's the following morning, and they remember it from the night before, but they don't remember what happened next. That's really, really common. Now, as I said, with sleep paralysis, you can get that, but I've dealt with lots of cases where the person has not been paralyzed at the time, so they might reach down and put the bedroom light on, yeah, and then at that point, this figure has kind of dissipated into thin air. I've had cases where people are literally tried punching it, and literally like gone for it, and it's kind of faded away, as there. Now you say that, then you're interpreting that as something in the brain, right? Okay, so it's faded away, so that means it wasn't physically there, right? I think that's a very, very narrow-minded view to hold with this, like. There's plenty and plenty of cases where the beings are seemingly materialized or dematerialized in front of people, both the craft and the beings, yeah. And you could interpret that as them coming through from another dimension of reality. There's cases where these beings have literally stepped out of people's bedroom walls in light, like the light will appear, and these beings will emerge out of the light, out of a solid wall or some like solid ceiling. We've even had things come down out the ceiling. It's really weird. And then they'll sometimes take people back through that, almost like the rules of reality have shifted, and they can take them through solid objects. So people are like literally levitated off the bed, and then they'll float through the wall, and they'll pass through the wall, and then they'll be outside, and they might see a craft above waiting for them, or they might not. I've dealt with people who've got long-term phobias from that. So this again kind of leans into the authenticity of these experiences. It can sometimes leave lasting phobias with people. So I've dealt with people who've got vertigo and are scared to go in elevators and scared of heights because of their contact experiences, because of their memory of floating out of their house and being up in the air and looking down and seeing like the neighborhood after dark and that sort of thing. It's really fascinating. And when you get elements like that sinking into it, it brings home the reality of what you're dealing with. Because why would a hoax story lead to an ongoing trauma or ongoing phobia of something?
In terms of your experiences dealing with people, is the general consensus that these people feel chosen or special, or do they feel like it's a bad experience? Do they feel that it's something that that they've been chosen in a good way, or do they think they've almost been picked on and it's left a sinister kind of memory?
A lot of the time, it's a big mystery as to why they've been chosen, and people will be like, "I'm not special. I'm like an everyday average person." Yeah, and
Yeah.
there doesn't seem to be any definite rules with this. Like some researchers will think that they've come up with rules relating to this, and they'll kind of go down theories that they think prove why people are being taken and that sort of thing. To me, looking at it, there doesn't appear to be that many rules. There's a slight link towards females rather than males, about 55 to 45% last time I did a check. Yeah, so it's roughly the same. People of all age groups, people of different backgrounds. I've dealt with cases involving people who've got no knowledge of the UFO subject at all, other people who are fascinated by the UFO subject, which has sometimes been as a result of their previous experiences and sometimes not. Sometimes they just kind of happen to be into the subject and then will have an experience. So there doesn't appear to be any strict rules. It seems to be like an ongoing program of some kind that's happening here that I think has been going on for decades and will probably continue to go on for a long time. I don't think there's any sign of it coming to any kind of end. There's definite agendas that are observed with this again and again. So there's an environmental agenda with this. It's really interesting. So the beings quite often will warn people of the destruction of Earth, yeah, and they might show them images like either inside their head or sometimes on a physical screen on the craft. Images of like bombs exploding, forest fires, the world burning, nuclear holocaust, that sort of thing. Now, you could interpret this as the beings care for us as a species and know that we're going to wipe ourselves out or something and are trying to warn us of to not go down that route. Or maybe they don't care about humans and they care about our planet and they realize that humans are going to destroy the planet. And they're trying to stop us from doing that. But the weird thing is, it's like if you were going to do that, wouldn't you go to the heads of industry and that's something, the people that can actually make a change
Yeah.
rather than random people?
I think this is the thing people struggle to understand when they hear these sort of stories, about these beings telling them, warning them about
Yeah,
environmental catastrophe. You're like, well, if they say it's like me, as
yeah,
much as that's a great, message to
yes.
warn people, I'm not going to be able to really do a great deal. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
So
why don't these experiences happen to influencers or decision makers or
absolutely, yeah, yeah.
politicians?
And they probably do as well. So there's going to be some people in that who happen to be in that line of work that probably have had contact experiences. They might not talk about them publicly. There have been some governmental people who have come forward to say they've had experiences themselves, of course, over the years. But it might be that the beings don't understand this. Like that's us trying to humanize something that isn't human.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we don't really know how the beings perceive that or whether they know the difference between people and who would be the right person to talk with in the first place. Or maybe it's something subconscious, like a lot of people view it as some kind of subconscious change to the human race, and that slowly over time we're subconsciously going to become more aware as a result of these interactions. Some people believe that they've got some kind of mission, like after they've had contact, they feel that something's coming in the future, and they usually don't know exactly what that is, but they believe that they're going to be part of it in a certain way.
Mm.
It's really interesting, but more often than not, people don't really know why they've been taken, and they're just like, "Why has this happened to me?" Sometimes multiple times.
Yeah, when you talk to public agencies like the MOD or
Yeah,
you talked about Birmingham Airport, what's the general response? Is it dismissive or are they like,
they're
that's
generally
great.
helpful.
Yeah, so they're like, yeah, great you've come to us. We're not saying something weird didn't happen, but we can't find any record of anything weird
That's
happening.
correct. Yeah. So
So,
usually, if you're going to go to the MOD, it has to be very specific. You have to be like, on this date at this time, did you have a military exercise going on in this area,
mm,
or did you pick up something on radar? And then they'll come back and they'll say, no, we didn't. And you can take that as them talking the truth or not talking the truth. Yeah. I mean, let's say it's some sort of military exercise that they don't want the public to be aware of. Nothing to do with aliens, yeah, but it's like like a top secret military exercise that they're doing. They're not privy to tell you just because there's a Freedom of Information Act doesn't mean they necessarily have to tell you
mm,
it. We don't really know the rules regarding what they are or aren't allowed to put out in what circumstances. So even though there's this kind of view that the Freedom of Information Act means exactly that, means they've got to tell you, it doesn't at all. You get back that response from them, and you can read into that if you want, or you could. And again, Birmingham International Airport is usually with that. It's like, did you detect something on radar at this particular location? And I'll tell them who I am. I'll go to them and I'll be like, I run Birmingham UFO Group. I'm looking for, whether an object was seen on radar at this position at this time. And they'll come back and they'll say, oh, we didn't get anything. They're usually pretty helpful like that. They'll come back with a response. They won't kind of laugh at me. They won't be like, ha, little green man, go away, something. That doesn't really happen. So they're usually pretty helpful. But you've got to be quite specific with it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, especially with the MOD, otherwise they'll be like, it's not specific. They'll come back and they'll say, need more information, not specific enough. So I can't go to them and I can't say, some point between 2003 and 2004, was an object caught on radar. It's not good enough.
So just staying on that topic for a second. Does the UK government have a bureau or a body or an office that looks at weird things, things that are outside the ordinary?
It's widely believed that they do. There was a UFO desk for a while. It's quite secretive on the UK side. So they had a UFO desk in the MOD, but really all that did was gather sightings. So that was people ringing up the MOD to say, I've seen something weird, because people don't know who to talk with. Yeah. So sometimes they'll come to a UFO group like my group. Sometimes they might go to the police. Sometimes like the police have got hundreds and hundreds of cases on record where people have rang them to talk about UFOs they've seen. And they're like, what are we supposed to do about that? And sometimes I go to the government, yeah. So when they go to the Ministry of Defence, there was a UFO desk. I say was, probably still is, yeah. They officially kind of closed the UFO desk, or so they say, and they put out a whole load of reports of their so-called findings. The trouble is, again, we don't know whether that's 100% of the reports or just the ones that they're happy to share. And most of the time, in most cases, yeah, it's kind of, you can view it anyway. The information goes out. It's largely testimonial. Most of the time, it doesn't involve any kind of military cover-up. So they don't really care whether the information's out there or not. They're probably fully aware that some people are going to believe it. Some people are going to be fence-sitting with it. Some people are going to be massively dismissive of it and say, oh, it was just a story and that sort of thing.
I mean, from my perspective, it would make sense to have a central point where you could collect all this information. Doesn't mean it's a UFO or an alien abduction, but it might be something legitimate that the government needs to know about. It could be like a new weapon or just a phenomena, natural phenomena that people are experiencing up and down the country. You know what I mean? I think there needs to be a place, because there might be a lot of useful information. Most of it can probably be easily kind of answered. But, where people can like identify patterns, or maybe there's something going on that's perfectly rational, but, the government need to know about it for people's safety or whatever. I just want to talk quickly about, in America, there was a lot of drone episodes that were kind of captured, and there was a lot of panic about, where the nature of these drones or the origin of these drones.
That's going on over here as well, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, have we got anything similar happening in the UK?
It was going on a lot, like towards the start of last year, yeah. We had all sorts of incidents going on. Sorry, it's not this year. So there was that period of time, wasn't there? It was heavily in the news. There was lots of things going on. It was going on in the States. It was going on in the UK. It was going on across in Germany and Sweden as well, and possibly elsewhere as well. I think it was Japan cases. Either way, it seemed to be kind of widespread over a short period of time, and the government put that down to people flying test drones and that sort of thing, and just accidentally encroaching on the space. But that doesn't really work for me yet, because drones have been commercially available since 2013. So why the sudden spike now at the start of 2025? It doesn't make any sense, yeah, because they've been out for years. So surely that would have happened always. Some people put it down to Russia, think it's kind of like Russian spying on different countries and that sort of thing. There was a lot of cases with those drones where they were seen to perform odd things, like be radar dark and stuff that they usually wouldn't expect. Now, this might be a mix of things. It could be like some of the time that could have been misidentification or whatever, or sort of jumping on the bandwagon and overemphasizing what actually happened. And other times it might be genuine kind of better drone technology, like radar blockers or whatever on them and that sort of thing. It seemed to die down after a while. I believe it is still going on. There were some cases quite recently where, with video footage, with an object with numerous red and green and lights on it was filmed over a particular airport. So it's still happening, but it doesn't. It seems to have died off quite a lot,
Mm.
and you kind of get that with this subject. You get kind of swathes of activity of certain things happening, and then it'll kind of move away. There's
Yeah.
been some very interesting developments in the States since 2017. It all started with the with the acknowledgement of the secret Pentagon program that was studying UFOs. Now, if you're naive enough to believe that that's happening in the States and not happening in the UK and other countries, then go ahead, right? The MOD have been very, very tight-lipped about this. They haven't made any announcements, any statements at all about all this, about all the announcements and things happening in the States with this. Now, why on earth would it just be going on across there? Yeah, it's a worldwide phenomenon. Yeah, UFO sightings are seen in all countries. It's going on all the time, everywhere. So it's very likely that the same stuff that's been happening in the States has also been happening here in the UK. And talking about military interceptions, as in Navy and Air Force, etc., encountering these objects up close. Now, in the States, they've made incredible statements, really, really significant statements. Have they said they're extraterrestrial? No, they haven't. They haven't once said, we think these things are extraterrestrial. But there's been lots of people who've been involved heavily in this who have said that these objects are quite clearly intelligent and
Mm.
performing maneuvers,
Yeah.
outmaneuvering their military. Now, this is the American military. The American
Yeah.
military is at the head of its game, yeah. If they are the most powerful military force we've got on the planet. If there's any kind of latest technology and that sort of thing with jets, etc., it's coming out of the States, yeah. So whatever these things are, they're outperforming their military. So you put two and two together, they're from outside. Whether you want to believe that that's off-world or not is irrelevant here. Another intelligence is involved with this subject.
So talking about off-world, what's your theories on this phenomena? I know it's a huge area and there's lots of
It is, yeah.
different types of phenomena, but
Yeah.
if we talk about these experiences like the one you mentioned in Scotland with the being
Yes.
moving along the hedge, what are your theories as to the origins of where they're coming from?
So there is all sorts of viewpoints on the origins of these things. Like obviously the most common one that's widely believed is that they're extraterrestrial. Yeah.
Mm.
But there's a lot of evidence pointing towards them being extra dimensional. So like we said earlier on in the conversation about them coming in and out of reality, and the craft can do that as well. So they can be there 1 second, gone the next, can appear in the clear sky. Now, do you interpret that as going through another dimension, or do you interpret it as some sort of cloaking technology, like it's still there but it can't be seen by out of the visible spectrum? Again, a possibility. Yeah.
Mm.
Some people believe that they're from Earth's future, so something that future humans are sending back now to collect samples in the current time period for whatever reason. And that would link in there with what we said about the environmental aspect of this, with a warning us about destroying ourselves. If they come from the future, they might know that the planet's going to go to hell, and they're trying to save the planet. But then they would also know exactly who to talk with in this time period, right? So yeah, swings and roundabouts.
Mm.
Some people will take a religious stance with it and believe that they're kind of angels or something like that, and go down that sort of route with it. Other people believe that maybe they've been here all along, like there's some kind of species that exists alongside you. They're not from off-world; they're here. They've always been here, and they just kind of sit in the background, and maybe they're kind of watching our development as a species, or like some sort of experiment. So the only evidence that it's not any of those things, I don't think that it's human. Yeah, there's very little evidence pointing to the idea that these beings are being created in labs somewhere. Yeah, and that some kind of group within a particular country or whatever, or maybe across multiple countries, is building these things and then putting them out there in these highly advanced craft. It doesn't. There's not much evidence for that. We've never had any kind of whistleblowers really come forward for that. There is certain cases online that but it's hearsay, it's internet rumors, it's conspiracy theories. It's not
What
like there's not any kind of hard facts pointing towards that.
what do you think about Bob Lazar and his stories?
I think his views are very, very interesting, and I suspect that probably correct. So in recent, so it's very obviously his viewpoints and what he was saying were quite extreme, and I can understand why a lot of people would be skeptical. But in recent years, with the States, numerous people have come out talking about a top secret retrieval program where they've got these crash things and they're trying to back engineer them, and that would link directly into stuff that Lazar's been saying all along. And these people are quite obviously they've been they're trying to shut them down. They're trying to stop U.S. Congress from talking with these people. They've got hard evidence of that. That's not me just interpreting that. It's known. U.S. Congress have been trying to talk with these people in a SCIF, yeah, which is essentially a top secret, off the record conversation in depth. They don't want to talk about it publicly because they've signed rights agreements, that sort of thing, and they can be in serious trouble if they talk publicly about this stuff. So you can hear Congress asking them in these hearings, who's doing this? Yeah, who's behind this? And they'll say stuff like, I can't tell you here, but I want to talk in a SCIF. Yeah, that means they want to talk privately to US Congress behind the scenes. There's evidence the US Congress have been trying to get those SCIFs set up with certain people and have been actively blocked by other people in. So anybody who thinks that the US Congress is in charge of what's going on with this and has overbearing on everything, they're not. And they're starting to realize that they're being blocked from this.
Did you?
So
Sorry, Dave. Did
sorry,
you call it
yeah,
a skiff?
yeah, SCIF, yeah.
And what's that? Sorry, what is that? Is that an abbreviation or?
It is an abbreviation. What's it called? I can't. Sorry, I'm not. You
Don't,
can
wor-
put me on the spot
don't
now.
worry,
Don't
don't
want
worry.
I can't remember what the words what the SCIF stands for. You better find it online.
Yeah.
Anyway, essentially, it means a private conversation between U.S. Congress and one or more individuals where they might reveal more information directly to them off the record for Congress to look into.
I think that's always the frustrating thing for people like you and me who are like, well,
Yep.
surely it's always in the public interest because by not addressing something, the speculation grows, and it doesn't go away. And if they would say, oh, it's something benign, it's the Russians or we're testing a new missile or, that would be the end of it, and I get, there's government secrecy that has to be,
Yeah.
but in certain areas you do question if they're abusing that
Yeah.
power.
The fact that there's a top secret that this is above top secret is this is really really high level. Yeah, the secrecy around the UFO subject is very very high level indeed. And there's a lot of people who've gone digging, sometimes very famously. So, for example, the Roswell incident in 1947. I absolutely believe that was a downed craft with beings recovered. There are literally hundreds of witnesses who've gone on testimony, including deathbed confessionals by people pointing towards it being that. Yeah. The government has tried to kind of say it was a top secret advanced balloon project and that sort of thing, Project Mogul and this sort of thing. And it doesn't bear weight when you consider like the testimonies on record regarding this. Now, President Clinton famously went looking into Roswell. So the president, yeah, yeah. Why would you hide stuff from the president, right? He went looking into Roswell. This is decades on, yeah. This is like it happened back in 1947, yeah. And he hit brick walls with that. Now, why on earth would they have any problem in, let's say it's some sort of top secret weather balloon experiment thing? Why on earth would they have any problem in the president of the United States of America finding out that information decades on?
Mm.
Roswell wasn't that. It wasn't that. And they realized it. And from that came the cover up and it's spread out worldwide now. But I believe that America are certainly in charge of that cover-up operation. There's been lots of cases that have occurred here in the UK and other countries where, in theory, it shouldn't have involved America at all, and yet people like unknown people in suits or whatever, call them men in black if you want, or whatever you like, yeah, government agents with American accents will turn up and will take the evidence away. Sometimes have been known to take actual physical evidence away, like bodies and that sort of thing, and debris, and they'll cut it off, and it'll go off to the States and never seen again. So they appear to be having there's some sort of hierarchy to this, and I believe that it's came from the States to cover up, and I believe it goes on to this day. And there are countless documents on record and statements by people right up to the ex-head of the CIA stating that this is real. And they can't talk about it while they're in their positions of power. So while they're in those positions, a lot of the time they won't say anything about it. But after they've retired from those positions, they're more open to coming forward with stuff. And there's many records where they've stated categorically, yes, this is real. It involves other intelligences. We've known about this for decades, and we are covering it up from the general public.
Okay, I'm gonna change tack now. I'm gonna ask you some quick
Yeah, sure.
fire questions, and I
Sure.
know some of them may not be off topic, and you're not an
I don't
expert, but
mind.
it's just a bit of fun. So, bases in
Yep.
Antarctica. Have you heard about that? There's a lot of
Of course,
theories
yeah.
about the
Yep.
bases there. What's your thoughts?
Largely internet rumors.
So nothing substantial that kind
I
of it's a
don't.
bit.
There's not. There's all sorts of claims and stories with this subject, yeah, where it's not actually backed up by people. And when you go looking into the people involved who've made these statements, you find that they're not that well trusted. I'm not saying it isn't going on,
Yeah,
but I'm saying I haven't seen enough evidence of it
to
yet to
convince you that there's
convince
something
me.
going on
Yeah,
there. The moon is hollow, or some
no.
sort of base, or
No, I can see why people might think that, and especially you've got the whole thing with the dark side of the moon and that sort
yeah.
of thing. And no, I think it's a moon. I don't think it's a base.
Okay,
I suppose it could be. Huh?
underwater bases. Again, there's some speculation that actually UFOs and these
Yes,
objects actually come from underwater.
agreed. So with that, I certainly think that there is evidence of that. So there's lots of cases on record where people have. I've dealt with some directly. USOs they're called, unidentified submersible objects. So fishermen might see something flying along under the water, a large object glowing and that sort of thing. Things down there. It makes absolute sense for if these beings are from elsewhere. We've kind of gone off topic. We were talking about that earlier on about whether they're definitely from outer space, and you didn't know where to mass on that one. We'll get back to that in a minute. But yeah, it makes perfect sense that if they are coming from elsewhere, they would establish some kind of bases here on the planet. And it makes absolute sense for those bases to be somewhere very, very out of sight. Why not the deep sea? That makes perfect sense. And that would fit in with the USO cases on record. And there's some of them are very, very impressive, the cases on record, like Navy cases where they've, entire battalions have seen objects come up out of the sea and that sort of thing. So the transmedium objects, so the fact that they're doing that implies that there's something going on underwater. We obviously haven't found any of those bases because otherwise you could go down there and start getting scans of it and that sort of thing.
I think,
But I
if
think
I
it's
remember
likely.
right, there were some pictures on Google Earth. And I know Google Earth is open to interpretation. And I
Yeah.
think there was something off the coast of America, North America. And
Yes.
famously now it's pixelated, all that area you can't now
Yeah.
see on Google Earth. And it just kind of adds to the kind of, the
Yeah.
conspiracy theory element of these stories, which is great. I mean,
Yeah.
thinking about what see people at sea must see. I mean, there must be some sort of very natural phenomena, but it must be very weird. Some of the sights you see when you're out at sea, and it could be
Yeah.
perfectly, explaplainable by some sort of northern light kind of effect,
Yeah,
or
absolutely. And then you've got glowing algae and that sort of thing in the water
yeah,
sometimes that can sometimes, yeah, maybe describe some of those cases. But then there's other cases where, like, literally a physical object, like a triangular shaped craft, has come up out of the water,
yeah.
and they've reported it. And there was a famous case where they think that it landed on the actual boat, and they had the boat tip up, like there was an invisible object that had landed on it and was pushing down the boat. It's a really fascinating case.
So in the last few minutes, Dave, what would you like to discuss? Because I know we've got about 5 minutes left. Is there anything you want to
So
just?
yeah. So I'm currently documenting all the cases since 2007 in a big database. I'm in the process of, and it's something I wish I'd done from the off. Yeah, I should have done it when I started because the amount of work is ridiculous. So far, I've documented about 2,800 or so individual incidents, UFO sightings, paranormal cases, psychic things like premonitions, all sorts of stuff in there. And I'm hoping that when I've gone right through everything, I'm up to 2019 at the moment, so I'm getting there. Another 5 years to 6 years to document. And once that's done, I'm going to build some kind of front charts on it and that sort of thing. And then I'll keep it up to date. I'll be able to add new cases to it very easily. And I'm hoping that some really interesting patterns come out of that data. I'll be doing a new lecture on that, so I'll speak regularly on the lecture circuit with this stuff. But I'm hoping that through the database, we find some really interesting patterns linking certain aspects of the phenomena together. Either way, it'll be a good record, and I intend to get it out via the Birmingham UFO Group website for people to freely go in and muck around with and find the cases.
So kind of like an X-Files, your own version of this
Yeah,
kind of
sort of, yeah. Because I've already got
repository
that.
of.
Yeah, I've sort of already got that through the case reports. So there's over 600 case reports written up, sometimes pages and pages in length, that are free to read on the Birmingham UFO Group website right now. So the
And
majority of cases we investigate, we write up as much evidence as we can with maps and pictures and everything in.
so you say you're chairman of the Birmingham UFO Group. Is
Yeah,
that what it's called?
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And have you seen any change in the popularity of these groups? Do you get peaks, or, when you see, for example, things in the news
Mhm.
about unexplained phenomena? Do you get a buzz of kind of
Yeah, yeah,
inquiries and membership, and
we do. Yeah,
do
yeah.
you? Sorry, go on.
Yeah, we've had in recent years we've had more people because of what's going on in the States. Not here in the UK. Yeah, like I said, there's not much has changed here in the UK. Sightings are still going on, and they're going on everywhere. And looking at my cases, it makes Birmingham look like this ridiculous, massive UFO hotspot. It's not at all. Like if I was working from Portsmouth or whatever, I'd make Portsmouth look like a massive UFO hotspot. Yeah. Like I said, these things are going on everywhere, and of course, Birmingham being a highly area of high population, the likelihood is going to go up that people are going to see it around the Birmingham area as well. So that helps with that as well. So yeah, absolutely.
It is a shame, like you said, that the UK, and I imagine there are plenty of other countries, don't seem to, or the government don't seem to acknowledge this phenomena. Doesn't mean they
Yeah.
necessarily say it's little green men or anything, but
Mhm.
they should at least acknowledge, like the US government have, that the
The same
strange
thing.
stuff that's
Yeah.
happening, that it's
Yeah.
not us. I can't say exactly
Yeah.
where the origin is. Because, like you say, it's kind of like we're missing out because all these things are happening all over the UK and all over the world. And it's
Yeah.
just like they're not being documented. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
that again, I guess,
It's a can
causes.
of worms. That's the problem. It's a can of worms.
Yeah.
So with the secrecy of it, once you take the lid off that, once you say there's something there, then people are going to go back and question that. And they're going to be like, okay, what's there? Tell us what's there. Why can't you tell after all this time, after decades and decades? Surely you've worked it out by now. Yeah. Okay. Surely there's cases where you've brought these things down or had direct
Yeah.
conversations with these beings, and that's tell us about that.
I,
And
I,
it gets
I
people
can
thinking.
I can see people's points. You've got the army, the Air Force, and they've got such uh, brilliant tools to kind of detect stuff. That they're doing stuff that as civilians, we you don't dream of. They got access to all this rich information. They can see things in their aircraft and stuff. And I think, like you said, that you've got people in Scotland who are seeing these weird phenomena. They must the military. They must have access to so much more platforms where they
Absolutely.
see it.
Yeah.
They interact with it. And I
Yeah.
think for you and me and for other people to think that this doesn't happen is not really, you don't accept that. They must see a lot of stuff all the time, and it's just a shame that
Absolutely.
they're not sharing
Yeah.
that with the public. It's a shame.
And I'm not saying that most of it isn't misidentifications because it is. Just because people are military doesn't mean that they're. I mean, obviously they're better at observing aircraft in different lighting conditions at different distances than the general public are, yeah. But they can still make mistakes,
Mm.
yeah, and they can still. Everybody's fallible to making mistakes with this, and the majority of cases that come my way, I believe, can be explained by mundane things, but definitely not all of them.
And just to recap, when you go into when someone contacts you, so you were saying on the phone that people get in contact with you, probably because there's no other channels, and they want to discuss it, explore it, understand what's happened to them better. So when they
Yeah,
contact you, you go at it from a almost like I'm trying to think a critical angle. So you're not like, oh yeah, I'm going to believe this. You go at it from this
right.
is probably not what the person thinks it is in the nicest possible way. There's some rational way of explaining what they've seen. That's how you come at it. Is that right? Like a
Yeah,
healthy
you've got to
skepticism.
remain grounded. You've got to remain
Yeah,
grounded with this subject. Yeah. So I'm a skeptical believer, if that's a thing. I
yeah.
don't like I absolutely categorically believe that this is real, and I think that a lot of skeptics will actively avoid certain facts of certain cases to make it fit their mundane explanations. Yeah, I don't do that. Yeah, if I see aspects of a thing that points towards it being non-mundane, I'll be like, okay, that's evidence that points towards it being something more unusual. Let's say somebody sees a grey disc-shaped thing on the horizon, yeah, and it moves along and it just kind of moves along on a straight path out of sight. Yeah? With that, you can't say that that's not some kind of balloon, yeah, like a disc-shaped balloon or maybe even a cylindrical balloon or whatever, drifting on an air current, yeah, right? And they're misinterpreting it as a large object. They might say, "Oh, it looked ginormous. It looked like 200 foot along." Yeah. And I'm like, well, did it? Was it? Because it's very hard with an open sky to accurately judge
Mhm,
distances. Yeah.
mhm,
And if you don't accurately judge the distance, that means you can't accurately judge the size or the speed of the thing either. So it can make an object look much bigger and
mhm.
faster than it in fact actually is. Yeah. Um, Now let's take exactly the same case. Yeah, they're watching this thing. It's moving along like that. All of a sudden, it stops dead and then shoots up at thousands of miles an hour, like, and it's gone in a second like that. Yeah, that cannot be. You can't say that that was a balloon. Yeah, the sudden change of direction and sudden vertical velocity that that thing moved away at. Yeah, puts a balloon explanation out of the question. It also puts away anything like, oh, it's an aircraft and it's so far away that you can't see the wings and tail. So you've got to be realistic with these cases, and you've got to be like, okay, what am I being told by people? Yeah. But then you've got drones. So drones can perform. So drones make it harder, right? Because drones can perform interesting maneuvers like that. They can look like they can suddenly stop on a dot and they can shoot upwards or downwards and that sort of thing. And if they're misinterpreting it, but I've dealt with so many cases where people have seen things shoot right across the horizon, like they're there and then they go away like a bullet. I've dealt with military cases. There's a military case that I've dealt with from Greece where 20 soldiers saw that on a base, and I've spoken in great depth with one of those soldiers. It took a while to gain the gentleman's trust because he was scared I was going to reveal his details to the public. Once I gained his trust, it was then important for me to understand whether he genuinely was a soldier in the Greek Air Force. Yeah. So he proved that to me by sending me photographs of him on the base, and also with his face. Well, I blacked out his face in the released photographs. He also sent me photographs of his military uniform that were for my benefit only, with his name tag on. Um, so there was that trust level on both ways. Once we'd gone over that, he then went into depth about a case in 1986 where him and his entire squadron saw a triangular shaped UFO hovering over their base, and it performed a bullet maneuver like that, like it was hovering still in the air for about 10 minutes, and then it suddenly shot away into the distance. These are military witnesses who would know full well what a normal aircraft looks like over the base and when it's something unusual.
Just go back to where we were talking about. So your group, you run this group in Birmingham in the UK,
Yeah,
and you have people come along. So you do meetings every month, is it, or
we
is
do.
it?
Yeah. Yeah, we do monthly meetings on the first Thursday of every month. They take place in Albury. The venue is a Hot Shots Snooker Club function room. It's on Croswell's Road in Albury, and anybody's welcome to come along. Meetings kick off at 7:30 and generally go on till about 11 o'clock. And there's free parking on the road outside, well-priced bar. It's not blocked just for official members or anything like that. Anybody's welcome to come along. You can find out details of upcoming meetings on the main page of our website, bufog.com, bufog.com. And we've our next meeting in day after fireworks night is going to be a talk by Nathan Lockley on British cryptids. So he's going to be talking about UK weird creature sightings. So not all of our talks are on UFOs.
Yeah.
Quite a few of them are, but we sometimes branch out into other areas as well. And
It's
we've got a nice open community to, yeah, if you want to come and get involved.
and you're a friendly group. You've got men and women,
Yep.
different ages, all
Yes.
represented there. So it's very welcoming.
Yeah,
Crypt
absolutely.
UK cryptology. What is a cryptozoology? That
Yep.
sounds fascinating. I know we spoke about it, and so that's a whole new podcast there. But I think it's great that there
Indeed.
are communities, groups like yourself, where people can get involved and learn a bit more about, the subject and go into it
Yeah,
as deeply as they want to.
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thanks for being on the podcast, Dave. I really appreciate your time.
No problem. Thank you very much, Tony.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.